Welcome, everybody, to the Kramer Show. I got a very, very exciting guest today. I've got Jimmy Douglas from Plug. Plug's a technology company focused on modernizing EV technology. He's got deep roots in automotive. He spent in EVs, everything EV. He spent a decade at Tesla in remarketing. Since then, he's become a trusted voice in EV residual management, retail innovation, D2D EV solutions, and everything in between. So, Jimmy, it's great to have you on the show today.
Good morning. Great to be here.
So there's a lot going on with EVs right now, especially after in Q3, we had the roller coaster ride of the EV credits going away. And then now everybody's, there was a lot of new car franchises like, should I order them? Should I cut off the allocations and that sort of thing? And everybody always kind of follows the lead of Tesla, which you've got more insight than anybody in retail automotive on. So what's Elon Musk thinking right now? He just lowered the price on these new Model 3s. So they take away the EV credits. He's lowering the price. You've been on the inner workings of that. What's the strategy there? What are they thinking?
Yeah, so any direct consumer automaker needs to be deploying a bit of a throughput strategy. When a vehicle exits the factory, it needs to have the owner identified as quickly as possible, ideally before the vehicle actually rolls off the factory line. And part of that is because there's no franchise dealer network. So there's no intermediate place where the vehicles ideally go. And Elon's entire mindset is to reduce the number of steps required in order to fulfill any activity. So the activity of manufacturing a vehicle and putting it in the customer's hands should be compressed into as short a time window and smallest number of steps possible. And when you think about retail automotive throughput, let's face it, consumers are very price elastic, and the monthly payment calculation prior to the credit expiration factored that credit. So in order to maintain throughput and keep producing the same number of vehicles and deliver to the same number of customers, it stands to reason that affordability needs to be as close to parity on a monthly payment basis as possible from last quarter.
So that makes sense. I mean, right now he's on those vehicles, you can get under $40,000 out the door, which is tough to do on most vehicles. Yeah. I mean, that's the price of that's less expensive than probably half the used cars on the market right now. So the EV credits of up to $7,500 went away. We just did a Cars Commerce post-credit survey. 61% of EV shoppers paused their purchase plans once the credits disappeared. So obviously the game's changed. Every trade number as a result before October is ancient history. So what's this new price floor mean for like new car dealers, used car dealers, acquiring used car inventory? How do you look at that?
Well, I'm sure you're seeing this in your data, but there was some artificial inflation and deflation going on while the credit was live. And some of what we've seen is that older models that might have seen their wholesale price elevated because there were dealers competing for tax credit cars are now coming back down to earth. And the easiest benchmark is look at a 2018 year model EV and see what it was going for 30, 60, 90 days ago versus what it goes for today. And then the inverse has been observed on newer EVs, where a 1-year-old model was nearly untouchable in wholesale because it was competing with a brand new car that had $7,500 on the hood. Now it doesn't. So some of the most competitive used EVs now are the newest ones.
Interesting. That's very interesting. So you're seeing a more movement on those sub $25,000 cars as a result of the $4,000 used car credit that went away?
I'm saying that some of them were
2018s.
I'm saying that some of them had inflated wholesale values because there was a collection of dealers that were competing with each other for tax credit qualifying vehicles. And now that the tax credit for used EVs is gone, the value of those vehicles is now more reflective of a non-artificially inflated market.
It makes a ton of sense. So for all the ICE dealers out there, because this is still kind of a nuanced space, we're seeing 6% of our searches on cars.com are for EVs, although 13% of the transactions are for EVs. So it's interesting. Wow. That's an interesting dynamic in itself. But for all the dealers that have to appraise it, because it's becoming a bigger, and it's going to continue being a bigger part of the market, how should they be looking at adjusting their trade-in values when Elon Musk, first they've got one on the lot that they need to price, but also they're appraising one from a few days ago and Elon Musk lowers the price $4,000. How should they adapt to that?
Yeah. So one of the differences with EVs is that their pricing is a lot more volatile and the movement up or down in their values is a lot more real time. One of the challenges with traditional appraisal means is that it'll typically rely on indexes that have some sort of weighting on transactions that happened weeks ago. And what you really need on an EV is the most real time signal from the market as possible. And while indexes can still be helpful in that regard, having real cash offers from sources that can curate them in as close to real time as possible is a much better signal for what the vehicle is truly worth.
Yeah, leading indicators more than lagging indicators, right? So I'd love
Exactly.
to know your thoughts on this, considering your prior life with residuals and remarketing with Tesla. So Q3 Cars Commerce data says that EV wholesale values fell 10.4% versus only 2.9% for ICE vehicles in
Mm-hmm.
Q3. So 10.4 to 2.9. Non-Teslas are down 11.7%. However, Tesla's almost flat at 2%. So
Yeah.
non-Teslas are close to 12. Teslas are down to, so Tesla's holding almost a 10% better valuation during this. And Tesla builds more EVs than all the the other automakers combined. So
Mm-hmm.
with that much more supply, why would they be so much more resilient to the market conditions?
Yeah, there's two things going on there. The first, if we're looking at sort of the fall between the Q2 and Q3 numbers, we have to remember that there was also a climb in Q2. And what goes up as a result of pull forward activity and demand in anticipation of the tax credit expiration does need to come down after the credit is ultimately gone. But the other component of this that people aren't talking about enough is the fact that the majority of used EV sales did actually not even qualify for that credit at all. The average selling price of a used
That's
EV,
so
according to
true.
Cox's data, was $35,000, and the tax credit limit was $25,000. And used Teslas obviously can be had on any end of that pricing spectrum now because there's so many in the market. But so many of them are outside of that tax credit window anyway. So that's one reason. The second reason is because there's a very small number of dealers that transact the majority of used EVs in the country. It's Carvana, CarMax, and the next 400 rooftops combined are selling about half of that market. The majority of dealers that are in the used EV business are really only in the used Tesla business. It's a product that they're very familiar and comfortable with. And increasingly, we're seeing them adopt other product lines. They're getting into Mach-E's, into Bolts, Rivians, Lucid, and all of that. But it pales in comparison to the demand in wholesale from dealers for Teslas because it's the most comfortable product line. And until we start seeing more adoption of the dealer body of the EV portfolio outside of Tesla, you'll probably see some more resiliency in their residual values through cataclysmic events like this.
Do you think the charging network with Tesla has anything to do with that?
Well, sure. There's so much more certainty in Tesla's supercharger network. Of course, I live in California, so it's not representative of the entire market, but I can very comfortably get in my Model 3 right now and drive basically anywhere and not be concerned about where I'm charging. Part of it is because the infrastructure is so robust and reliable, but the other part is because everything's baked into the navigation. So I don't have to think about planning where I'm going to charge and when. It plans all of that for me. Now that we see more vehicles rolling off the line that are not Teslas that are equipped with the North American charging standard, obviously the anxiety around road trips and destination charging is going to be in a much better place than it once was. But it's not just an infrastructure game. That navigation and payments piece is also a really big part of what makes people confident in their ability to just drive.
It's fascinating. So I know I've got my own opinions on this. As I look at the cars.com data, Q3, overall EV searches and views were down 8%. However, the used EV searches were up 12%. So are you seeing the same thing on your side, like from the results?
Yeah, we're about to enter the year of the used EV, right? As you know, we're going to see something like 1.1 to 1.3 million EV lease returns hitting the market between
Ooh,
2026 and the following 2 years. That's a huge tsunami, going from 60,000 this year to close to 300,000 next year.
that's
Uh,
half the rental car SAR, really, is what it is.
yeah, that's right.
It's
And
huge.
it's also going to improve affordability. It's not good news for those who are on the hook for the residual value risk on those leases. But what we've seen in the retail days of supply data is that EVs have been at parity with used combustion vehicles basically all year this year. But it's been hugging the line of the average selling price. The cheaper used EVs get, the faster they're selling in retail. And with that tsunami of inventory about to hit us all in the face, you best believe they're going to be a hot commodity, especially in the wake of wavering affordability for any new car right now in the light of tariffs and interest rates.
How should dealers be like setting expectations for consumers when they're appraising these cars? if there could be that volatility, because maybe they don't have technology like Plug or AccuTrade where they can get forward-looking data to see, where the trends are going. So and then what do they do about something if they aren't communicating that about a trade appraisal they did 5 days ago?
Yeah, I don't know if there's really any excuse for a dealer to not have technology like Plug or AccuTrade, number one. But number two, they're in one of two camps. They're either in the used EV business or they're not. And if they're not, their best bet is to lean into that and have an immediate disposition strategy. So there's certainty in that trade-in appraisal transaction and what their proceeds are going to be. When it comes to building confidence into the number with their consumer, the worst thing that they can do is come across as uncomfortable appraising an EV, especially because so many EV buyers who are about to enter their second vehicle might have some attachment to features that they paid for or capabilities that that vehicle has that is unique to that vehicle that doesn't necessarily show itself in a VIN decoder. The classic example on Tesla would be free supercharging for life that follows the car, or full self-driving that follows the car. Even on a Ford F-150 Lightning, there's a very big difference between the standard battery pack and the large battery pack in terms of how valuable that vehicle is in the wholesale market. And it's just really important for a dealer to show confidence in the why behind their number, positive or negative.
Right, tri-motor Rivians and
Yeah, and quad
yeah,
motor
there's a lot of
Rivians.
people that don't because the VIN doesn't always decode those things. How does Plug advise dealers to react to like panic selling or all the media and all the jargon without having the level of data that we look at, so that they don't sell them short, undercut margin?
Yeah, we advise everybody to build, just like the Tesla factory, a throughput machine when it comes to the used EV business. You need resiliency against pricing volatility, and you're not going to make it if your strategy is to hold vehicles for 45 to 60 days. Really, basically every dealer that transacts on Plug on the demand side is selling those vehicles in under 30 days. And that's because they're experts, but also because they've created a destination for consumers who are looking to be educated on the used EV purchase. That's really the only way to make money in used EVs right now. And one thing that surprises people is I don't run around on a soapbox saying every dealer should sell used EVs. I actually think the opposite is true. I think you're either in or out right now. And if you're out, you just need to be prepared to appraise them confidently and then have an immediate disposition opportunity. Whereas the dealers that are all in, they're ripping through them very quickly and very confidently.
That's a phenomenal answer. You're right. I
Thanks.
spent time with Alex Lawrence, and he was talking about. He goes, "Where do you guys get these 60-day turns from? The industry or whatever." He goes, I could never keep cars that long." He goes, "I sell them all in 24 days." I'm like, "Wow, that's a dream." But he
Sometimes
also is the best.
yeah.
Yeah, and he knows it. He markets it. His team knows it. You go in there, everybody knows everything. I mean, it's like an Apple store, right? Everybody knows how to explain that really well. They've got electricians. It's just, yeah, if you're not, that's very profound. If you're not all in, you should probably, yeah, you got to find the best end user from day one and not try to wait 60 days on those things.
Exactly.
So,
And quite frankly, the market's not big enough for everybody to be all in right now. That will change over time. But what percentage of used EVs make up the used car market now? It's still not even 3%, right? Like there physically are
right.
not enough vehicles for everybody to be all in. So if it feels like you shouldn't be yet, that's okay.
So 61% of consumers paused their EV plans, right? But cars.com still recorded 25 million EV VDP views in October. 25 million. So even though they say they're not transacting, people are still looking. So it means like 40% of consumers still believe some sort of rebate exists, or they're trying to figure out if it does or how to navigate it. 53% said they'd buy sooner if someone, going back to, I guess, what we were just talking about, 53% said they'd buy sooner if someone simply explained EV ownership better. What do you see on your end from that in different parts of the country?
Well, that's exactly right. That's the magic of EV Auto. Everybody that you speak to at that store in Bountiful and his other locations will speak to you very confidently about the product, the charging experience, the concept of total cost of ownership. How much range do you really need? What's the proper evaluation for the condition of the battery? It is a fundamentally different educational process and sales cycle because it's a fundamentally different asset. And the biggest disservice to everyone in this industry was the concept of dropping these new assets into existing business models, playbooks, without proper training and living through the process personally. So, of course, it's a struggle. So, the answer to your question, from my point of view, is the only way to win in this business is to start with a blank sheet of paper, live with an electric vehicle as your daily driver for a considerable period of time, and then be in a position where you can confidently walk somebody through that journey. It's not incremental, it's transformational.
It's so true. I see franchise dealers, same group, same, sometimes same franchise, that are in the same market, and one of them selling 100 used EVs a month, and the other one selling 5 or 10. And when I ask the dealer principal over the group, what's the difference? They typically say belief.
You know what's interesting, Brian, is there's about 500 dealers on Plug, and about 90% of our sales are Teslas right now. But 60% of the dealers that are buying the Teslas are franchise dealers. And most of them do it
Really?
through.
That is surprising to me. That's good.
It is good. We see plenty of franchise dealers out there that have a used car manager that figured out the arbitrage in the market, where creating a beacon for used Tesla sales and high volume in their market not only makes them quite a bit of money, it's also a good forcing function for their team to get into the process of differentiating their product from the Tesla because they're so familiar with it. And the Tesla inventory brings customers into the showroom where they might drive off in the Tesla, but they also might drive off in the Leaf.
Fascinating. So from your perspective, how can dealers re-educate customers on value, tone, or ownership cost, pre and post sale? The
It
ones
starts
that
with
aren't in the game, or they're toe dippers, those kind of dealers.
Yeah. Okay. So if they're not in the game, but they need to be confident around walking customers through maybe how the math is a little bit different, it's the best thing that you can possibly do is still live behind the wheel of one, whether it's a new one or a used one, because so much of the cost basis makes its way into your daily life in ways that you wouldn't expect. When I've owned 30 different gas cars, and many of them consumed a whole lot of gas, right? So and they were particularly high maintenance vehicles as well. When you're behind the wheel for a few months or the better part of a year of an EV, and you realize that you've never been to a gas station or any sort of repair facility other than tires potentially, and so long as you're able to charge your vehicle at home, you start to better understand sort of like the lifestyle differentiation, and why in some cases it might actually make sense to spend more money on an electric vehicle up front, because the overall cost over time can be lower depending on what you're paying for energy and, of course, other factors like how many tires you go through.
What other reconditioning things? Because I have noticed that it's not that it's more or less profitable for a dealer. It's just different. Like, it's upper control arms, it's struts, it's tires, it's a lot more of that, right? Than
Yeah.
A 60K or a 120K, at least from a maintenance standpoint, from a dealership's perspective.
Yeah, that's right. So long as you don't require invasive body work, the reconditioning throughput can be very fast. And the tooling required can be fairly lightweight to account for 90% of most cases, which is one of the reasons some of those franchise dealers really like them, because they might be able to cycle through a higher number of them with the same amount of reconditioning capacity within their recon operations.
Right, and a lot less time. So
Mhm.
if you're coaching dealers, or as you're talking to dealers, what's their role to train their staff, their sales managers, to restore confidence now that incentives are gone on the new and the used side?
Yeah, I think you and I can agree that anybody that was selling solely on the premise of a tax credit or pricing at all probably needs a bit of a reality check. And that would be true on any commodity. Winning based off price is just a race to the bottom at the end of the day. I
No,
wouldn't
perfectly
look,
said.
thank you. I wouldn't say that it's anybody's job to focus on EV sales. I would say it's everyone's job to focus on making sure the client is sold the right tool for the job. And it starts with the discovery conversations, and some pretty basic ones, right? Like just open ended. Tell me about your daily use of your vehicle, your commute, your kids' school, your road trips. What does your life actually look like 95% of the time? And then what are the outliers, the 5%? Are you going on 6-hour long haul drives 2 or 3 times a year? And getting into whether an electric drivetrain is suitable at all. And if it is, then what requirements should you have, whether it's battery pack size or a destination charging network, home charging, if that's available to you. An EV is not the right tool for every single job right now, but when it is the right tool for the job, you're going to have a much easier time selling it if you organically landed on that conclusion based on that super basic customer discovery.
I know we're getting more and more robust on cars.com in terms of giving those situations, articles about EV ownership. We've got a whole, a huge section on our website about it. What's Plug doing Or is there anything that cars.com has done or you think can do collaboratively to help bridge that information gap for the industry?
Yeah, absolutely. We got off the ground with the premise that we should bring as much transparency into the wholesale transaction as possible so dealers can confidently acquire inventory and then equally confidently merchandise that inventory to their retail customers. I see all of us lifting up the industry in this way and getting more nuanced around EV specific factors. And just like you said yourself earlier, VIN decoding was a very reliable method for a long time, but it's not suitable any longer because there's so much missing inside of that. And whether it's the size of the battery pack or the original range when the vehicle was new, or the number of drive units,
Subscription?
or software enabled features, either through subscription or through purchase, and whether or not those purchases can persist through ownership transfers, there's a whole new index of information that needs to be ingested and displayed and then educated on. And we all have a part in bringing the industry forward in that way. And that is by far the most important part of Plug's mission. And we're trying to do it for everybody, consumers and dealers alike.
So let me talk about the elephant in the room, range anxiety.
Mm-hmm.
So there's education around that. I learn more about it, especially as I travel around the country and up north. And there's a lot of biases. There's a lot of beliefs. Call them sometimes I call them folklore because it's not necessarily data based. But when it comes to range anxiety, it's a real thing. If it's real or just perception. But Cars Commerce just did a survey. 67% worry about charging, 59% worry about the range, 48% worry about the battery life, which I've actually been educated on a little bit more here recently. So what do
Yeah.
you see the reality is on the range anxiety versus the battery life? Is it 100,000, 200,000, 300,000? I actually don't know. So I'd be interested to know your thoughts.
Yeah. Well, nobody really knows because there's two things that are true. The first is that batteries are way more resilient than everybody thought. And the second thing is that the majority of units in operation are still too young and too low a mileage for us to know where the end really is. The most significant data set that exists on this is inside of two editions of Tesla's environmental impact reports. In those reports, they released information around the broader Model 3 and Y fleet that has crossed 200,000 miles. And that fleet has retained, in aggregate, 85% of its original battery capacity. For Model S and X, it's 88%. So said in another way, 200,000-mile
That's
cars are,
unbelievable.
yeah, yeah, it is. Especially when you consider the fact that the steepest part of the slope in that degradation is at the very beginning. So it stands to reason that when this study is done again, when the fleet crosses 300, 400, 500,000 miles, a very high percentage of those vehicles might still be above the threshold of 70% original capacity, which is the industry accepted designated bottom limit for the battery to continue to be used for its original intended use.
Interesting. Okay, well, I got some more questions around this. So how can dealers turn this education into a competitive advantage, either on their website or training?
Well, here's the great part for dealers. This means that EVs might very well be on the road and sold twice as many times as their comparative combustion vehicles, but they will spend the majority of their useful life outside of powertrain warranty protection from the manufacturer, which is a huge F&I opportunity, right? Just because a battery is at 85% at 200,000 miles doesn't mean that a failure could happen and that a failure would not be like a catastrophic financial event. So protection is a very necessary product. I would personally pay for a battery warranty if I were buying a vehicle like that. And I would buy a vehicle like that. And we're getting into a world where it's becoming increasingly easier to perform an evaluation of the condition of that battery. There are plenty of companies that are focused on this explicitly. So in underwriting one of those protection products, you can pretty well de-risk yourself by using data directly off the vehicle.
That's interesting. So I know like this, well, this has been very educational for me, your wealth of information. So
You are
this
too,
type of
Brian.
content, I appreciate that. This content right here is going to probably go off, and there's a lot of people that are going to tune into this. What can dealers do to like use data like this or stuff to answer their customers' questions to increase their own content to move the needle with EV skeptics?
Man, the best thing to do is to digest actual data, like what Cars Commerce is publishing, and manufacturers and other research companies, and dispel misinformation or feelings based statements with actual data. There's a vacuum of leadership in this space right now, and I'm doing everything I can to fill the void, and I know you are too. One of the reasons I love hanging out with you. But becoming educated on what the data is actually showing is the first line of defense against any misinformation or misconceptions. And the same is true here.
What do you think cars.com and retailer, just franchise dealers, independent dealers should be doing to tell the story around ownership and charging on their own sites, their own social?
Yeah, well, so the great thing about dealers is they have big megaphones within their local communities, and purchasing a vehicle is a hyper local purchase. You're generally buying in the market where you live, and therefore the dealers have a great opportunity to understand the map of destination charging surrounding them. And frankly, some dealers are even getting into the destination charging game, acquiring real estate assets, standing up chargers themselves to fill voids where they see that the need needs to be met. There's a lot of opportunity there. But ultimately,
I was at a Toyota dealership a couple of weeks ago, and there was a bunch of customers hanging out with their Toyotas that were from out of town. And I was asked, I said, I think you get some customers over. They go, oh no, people come here from all over the place to charge their Toyotas.
Amazing.
And it was like they were all sitting there having a conversation.
Of course. And then you can stand up a coffee shop, a public restroom, gift shop. There's plenty of ways to merchandise that. But the best thing for anyone that's at a dealer is to go on some road trips and some EVs from that local community, familiarize themselves with the road trip destinations that their customers are going to be concerned about, and speak with her firsthand experience. Like, yeah, I live in San Jose, California. I like to do a road trip to Los Angeles 2 times a year. I stop at the supercharger in Kettleman City. It's right across the street from In-N-Out. It gets hot there in the summer, so be careful. But other than that, like, nothing beats a milkshake and a double-double while you're waiting for 20 minutes to get back up to 80%.
That's so crazy. So crazy the world we're living in. So tell me your thoughts on this. Shoppers spend, I got my own thoughts on it, but on cars.com, shoppers are spending 27% more time per VDP looking at EVs than on ICE vehicles.
Yeah, they're trying to get educated. I would bet you that the majority of those shoppers are shopping for their very first EV.
Right. So there's a lot more education that has to happen. It's probably the same way in the showroom, I would imagine.
Yeah.
That they're looking for that type of information, but maybe they don't always get it.
They don't always get it. It's a very mixed bag, and I'm sure you've seen this. It's a very mixed bag when you walk into a dealer, whether you'll be able to speak to a subject matter expert on EVs or not, and that's okay, right? We're very early in this adoption cycle, so it's not my expectation that everybody needs to be an expert today, especially when it reflects at best 9% of your sales and less.
Yeah, but on used cars, it's higher than that. I think it is important. And I always tell everybody, they go, well, and it's like this binary dichotomy of, well, it's got to be this or that. And I'm like, well, look, when hybrids came out, I remember when this happened early on with Prius and 400H Lexuses, and there was a lot of pushback on that. It's new. I don't like it. I don't like change. And I said, look, whatever the percentage is, the market share, you should be there or higher, right? So it's not a matter of it's yes or no. It's, am I at 9%? Am I at 13% like Carvana? And if there's an opportunity and somebody else isn't taking advantage of it, my favorite kind of car is the one with the lowest market day supply. And it always has been. It always will.
Yes. That's such a
And EVs on cars.com actually turn 1.6 times faster than ICE vehicles, which that number blew me away. Do you see the same?
Yeah. And it's because half the sales come from a very small number of dealers that know exactly what they're doing, and they're ripping through them so quickly. The other half of the sales are, from my vantage point, are at dealers that have like one at a time, if that. And so it's the occasional trade-in, basically.
And they're going to try it. The average a little bit. Somebody wants to start, a customer wants to drive it. I've experienced this, right? And the salesperson, well, I experienced this with Alex Lawrence on a Cybertruck. I was like, wait, because I'm trying to open it up like another Tesla, and I couldn't. And I'm like, so if you're not prepared for that and you're with a customer and they're looking at you as the expert, you better know how to start it. You better know how to open the doors, just the basics, use the navigation, at least be somewhat familiar with it so that you are the best end user, or find out or dispose of it to somebody like Dealer Club or Plug who can put it with the best end user quickly.
Absolutely. And if you're selling one of these vehicles, to a customer, you need to help them become the owner of the vehicle in the OEM's digital system as well. Particularly in a Tesla, that customer can't supercharge on the way home if they're not the owner of the vehicle in Tesla's system. So ownership transfer is a really important part of that retail experience.
I didn't even think about that. Or grounding the vehicle or trading it in. That's a whole nother part of the process, right? That you have to have some familiarity with for not just transferring ownership, but getting them to pay off the lease or the lease buyout. There's other nuances with that, right?
Yeah, you can't transfer ownership if the vehicle is still under a lease contract. So that's a really important step.
Yeah, I learned that the hard way years ago. After we took it in on trade, figured it's easy.
Could have called me, Brian. Could have
So
helped you out.
right. So how are UZVs the real entry point to electrification in 2025, 2026 from your perspective?
Price. They're so affordable now, and they will be more affordable than 5-year-old ICE vehicles next year because there's so many hitting the market. Like it's impossible that doesn't happen. And we were relying on tax credits to make them affordable before. Now we don't need to anymore. And that's also good because, as we mentioned earlier, the majority of used EV sales didn't qualify for the tax credit anyway. And the lion's share of new car tax credits were being harvested on leases, often as just a monthly payment reducer, as a huge focal point in the sales process. But now that these will be the most affordable modern used car option for many people, it will be a forcing function for dealers and consumers alike to get serious about it and maybe look for data instead of leaning so hard into some of the anecdotes that are oftentimes driven by fear.
No, all my daughter's parents, friends of ours or whatever, that always ask, "Hey, what should I get for my 16-year-old?" And I tell every one of them, there's no better deal than a used EV right now for the late model technology, safety. It's really unparalleled. But
Sorry to interrupt. And it's a safer option too. Not just because the safety ratings are also higher, but think about it. Do you want your teenager like hanging out at a gas station when they can otherwise just plug in at home? And do you really need them to be able to drive for 6 hours? Like most of the driving that they're going to be doing is probably under a 20-mile radius, right? Like it's actually not just more affordable, it's actually the best tool for the job for a lot of people.
Yeah, the technology, the track, and the safety, the visibility with the cameras. And so going back into the retailing space, because my wheels are spinning now. If I was in retail right now, I would be getting with you, collaborating, trying to figure out what should I be thinking about for retailing, wholesaling. How do I know the difference? Which car should I retail? Which car should I wholesale? And how do I lean in and get aggressive while everybody else is scared and standing on the sidelines waiting to see what happens? You see people that are doing that right now. What's that look like?
Yeah, most dealers are in one camp or the other. Either they're such high throughput EV retailers that they don't even rely on pricing indexes. They know their market and they know what a vehicle will sell for. So they use that to inform their appraisal process. Or they have a pure wholesale strategy on EV trade-ins, and then they have their preferred method. And yeah, we've discussed at length that we both have offerings for that, and there are others, but the best version of that is a real offer from the market in as close to real time as possible, rather than relying on lagging indicators.
So for all the viewers, listeners that are watching this podcast, the first scenario Jimmy talked about, the people that know their market, that don't have to look at they'll look at it, but they know it. You call them up, hey, what do you think this thing's worth? They can just tell you like that, just like most dealers can with their own product. That's my definition of a best end user. That's one of our AccuTrade philosophies.
Yep.
If you have to be really indecisive and you're like, whoa, what do I do with this? I don't know. This is a Audi e-tron that dropped 21%, last quarter, or, something else that's volatile and you're not familiar with that, which is a phenomenal buy right now. But if you're not intimately familiar, you're not the best end user, you really should reconsider whether or not you want to play in that space when you could take that money, invest it in something safer, or you figure out a way to become the best end user.
You couldn't have said it any better, Brian. If you're going to tie up that capital, tie it up in something that you're going to move quickly and confidently. And we're not in a world anymore where the only option to competitively receive an EV trade-in is to tie up your own capital and lot space with it. You and I both have great options on the table for dealers that need to make that decision.
So how does data-driven marketing replace rebate-driven marketing in this new era? Because I agree. I think it's healthier for the industry. I like it better. It's more sustainable. It's less volatile. It's less you're selling price because that's not sustainable. Now all of a sudden everybody's got forced to focus on the product. But how's the marketing have to change?
Yeah, people need to think about the value proposition and understand who the EV buyer is. If you look at the marketing, you're so correct about this. It was all about price and monthly payment and tax credit. And in fact, being an EV at all. For the most part, if you look at Tesla's website, you can't even find the word EV. What you'll see is value propositions around safety and technology and charging infrastructure. The value proposition obviously needs to match the right people and the right use cases, and not every single person is the right customer for an EV. But when we talk about things like safety for your teenage driver, right, like that's the feature where suddenly they're in a vehicle that is top end on crash test ratings, and also never puts them in a position of being at a gas station late at night, and also providing peace of mind through technology on transparency of where the vehicle is at any given point in time, and also some controls around acceleration and who can drive it, as an example. Understanding the value propositions that matter for the personas and leaning into those is the best way to sell any product, instead of selling on price.
Yeah, we're doing that. I would actually recommend that all salespeople get on cars.com and we, leverage partners, like yourself, like we're current, to integrate that ecosystem to really create a healthy environment as a, like a real resource for any salespeople that are unsure, sales managers that are unsure, because there's so much data and information overload anymore. We're trying to make it really concise. So I got one final question for you, Jimmy. What will separate dealers who survive the price compression from those who are able to scale through it?
Velocity. And I'm sorry for like the most cookie cutter used car industry answer ever, but that is the cure to everything. At Plug, we spun up a subsidiary with a wholesale dealer license, and in this year so far, since doing that, we've bought and sold 500 used EVs around the country. A little more than that now. Our average turn time on them was 3 days.
That's a sweet spot. Well, yeah, you're right. You're operating in the fringe. So when you're operating like that, price volatility is not even a concern whatsoever. It's that's kind of the DNA and the roots of AccuTrade, it came out of wholesale. But when you're retailing all your cars at 22 or 24 days and the average car runs out of profit at 32 days, I don't know, I need to find out what that is on EVs. But you're always going to be profitable, right? And then when you go to 45 or 60 days, you're always going to lose money. I guess it is as simple as that.
It is. It totally is. And yeah, of course, like our 3 day turn time is a bit of a fringe in that we only sell to dealers at this point, and we sell nationwide. But the analogy remains true. The faster you're turning the assets, the more real time your own insights into the market become. So your dependence on third parties can also be reduced. But if you're not in this business in any large scale and you're receiving EVs purely as trade-in appraisal opportunities, then just lean on a partner. And I like your call out about us, about Cars Commerce, about Recurrent. These are all technology companies, but are very human powered in our relations. And I know for a fact that everybody that's a customer of yours, Brian, can call you and you might just show up hopping off of a jet like the next day, like in 3 different cities within like
it's my favorite thing to do.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Like you're not left like dealing with an AI chatbot right now in this industry. Like we're all very human powered because we care about what we're doing, and certainly we're scaling ourselves with technology. But this is a relationship driven business, and that's what we're all here to do: is bring people along for the journey and make lifelong friends at the same time.
No, it's the most exciting time in the history of automotive retail. I say it all the time, but there's nothing more exciting than partnering up with people like yourself and everybody else that we're mentioning to push the industry forward. It's only going to get more and more exciting. I thank you for coming on today. You were a wealth of information.
Thank you.
I learned a lot. I'm going to have to go back and watch this over again. But yeah, great content. And I look forward to seeing you at the next, I think I'll see you here shortly in Las Vegas.
Used Car Week, baby. Let's go.
Yep. Thanks, Jimmy. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Brian. Thank you for having me.